My parents were never people who thought that we would be migrating to any country. My father was one of the well-known journalists in the Philippines. He was a political journalist, but because of martial law, he was detained and he was imprisoned for 3 months, and he couldn't practice journalism in the country unless he would work for the government newspaper, and he refused to do that. It was a weird period of time, I think, if you can say that. Your speech is controlled, everything is controlled. And you just don't talk to anyone, basically. You start getting scared about seeing people who have military uniforms, because we also had curfews. So, there's this whole sense of threat. We already had a permanent residency waiting for us from the Australian government because he applied like a year before. But we were just waiting for the release permission from the Philippine government for our family to leave, and it wasn't coming. And suddenly, my dad said, we just have to pack up. We're leaving in about a month. He didn't want to compromise his political views and his ideas of freedom and independence. If he stayed in the Philippines, he did not want to compromise that. And up to today, I feel that's really been a strong part of who I am as a person and the way my family is as they are, and my brothers as well. Australia, all I knew about Australia was was koalas and kangaroos, and nothing really much. Butter, all the foods that like meat and all that stuff that comes from Australia, but nothing. Not such a big impression of the place. I was 15, and we arrived in Melbourne in 1975. When we first got off the plane, the airport was like almost bare. Like, it's not like in the Philippines where the airport was packed with people. Obviously, we're talking about different populations here. The way they spoke English, the customs officers, they were really like, I couldn't catch half the words they were saying. I mean, I spoke English quite well, but we couldn't catch some of the words that they were talking about. And then that day, it was foggy, so it was really cold. And, when you're feeling cold, you don't feel that there's any warmth around you. In other words, like psychologically, like people weren't warm. The people who greeted us, like, the officials, they had to do their jobs, obviously. But you feel this sense like coming from a very warm climate and family and sort of some safety, feelings of safety for family and protection. You come to somewhere where, this is really foreign to me. Each morning, it was just like white. It was freezing. And it didn't snow, but it was like looking and feeling desolate. We have to find out where we could get certain food. And then some of the ingredients, we weren't able to get it yet. They're Filipino ingredients, like certain sort of fish sauce that you would use for particular cooking. They didn't have it then, so you just had to revise things quite a lot, I realized when we arrived in Australia that there were quite a number of Filipinos who have actually migrated to Australia in Melbourne, who were nurses, tradesmen, so they came through that. There was a particular scheme that the Australian government had, so assisted passage scheme. Yeah, so there were quite a number of nurses who were working there, and we got to know them quite well. I started writing when I was pregnant with my first child. One of my biggest place was called Manila Takeaway. It's about the Filipino women who live in Mount Isa, who are married to the miners there. I was just amazed by the remoteness. Again, it's that whole theme of you are alone in a place, and they were like, they would have felt so much more alone than I have in such a remote area. And their husbands, usually some of them are, Australian born. Well, a lot of them weren't. They were actually coming from another country, Eastern European country, or I don't know, from somewhere in the world, who came to Mount Isa to mine. I have never been in a mining town in my life. I had such an amazing time because they invited me to their homes. They wanted to tell their stories. The whole sense of coming together, of working through their own experiences in life, their grief, their sorrow, their happiness, and the sense of resilience that they've had.
Where is my breakfast? And I don't want any of that stinking food either.
It resonates with me because I feel it's just like my story in a different way, in a different path. It's about adaptation. It's about, reviewing your own identity again. For that 6 days, I learned so much about what is it being an Australian. We're not the only Australians here. The real Australians are the Indigenous people, but their connection straight to their land and their country and their soil. But this sense of sharing this land and country and soil was really important to me as well. My first husband, he's Australian background. And it's very interesting that I myself, I didn't feel like I wanted to get married to someone with a Filipino background. And that's very telling for me because it means probably most likely that I have moved in my sense of who I am, and like understanding nuances and cultures, that I felt that I could move from one culture to another. So my children are Australian Filipinos. I feel every time I go back there now, I feel very, very comfortable in reintegrating with the day-to-day that's happening with my family there. It's like I just left yesterday and I've come back, and again straight away I'm in their daily routine. So I intend to work with probably community projects there because my background is social work. So do those sorts of work because I feel I'm still a Filipino. That's my background, my base background. And if I can be of assistance to my own people, I will, because it's still part of me. I did very well academically, but I think by year 11, I just had this, it's like a shock thing. Suddenly it's caught up with me. Life was easy. I could adapt to some things, but suddenly there's this, I decided I didn't want to go to school very often at year 11. And my teachers were really concerned and my family, and I had these physical symptoms as well of just feeling general unwellness. And it's like if I look back, I think probably I had some depression. Just the things that I used to be used to aren't there anymore. Now I've realized it after 2 years or a year. So it takes about, so I just reckon, that whole period, that whole year, I had to just I had to review everything that was normal to me as a 15-year-old, 16 or 17 by then, about who my friends were, about this sense of, it's looking like we're not going back to the Philippines at all to live. That whole sense of, I can't think that this is just a temporary situation. We couldn't go back straight away because my relative said, it's still martial law here. My dad couldn't go back to the Philippines for 10 years just because my relatives kept on saying, look, don't come back because you might get rearrested. And my mom, we had to go back because her mom died like a year or two after, after we arrived in Australia. And initially my relatives said, don't come back for the funeral. And that was really a tragic time for my mother. She was absolutely grief-stricken, for that whole year. But anyway, when we were able to go back 2 years later, yes, I felt like a foreigner coming back. I was only 17 at that time, or 18. I felt like, the way I dressed was different, slightly different, it's just different. And then my accent sort of changed a bit. I couldn't get in contact straight away with my high school friends or my other friends because we weren't staying in the house where I grew up in. The place was familiar, but to feel a sense of, I don't know how to get to these places anymore, was a bit of a revelation to myself. I think it was, again, another changing point of saying, I am actually, adapting or absorbing my environment in Australia, in Melbourne. Since I've come to Australia when I was 15, I've become more and more curious about knowing about my culture historically. I value that. That would be my base where I start from. But I value also the fact that, I have all these other influences from diverse cultures and from what we call Australian sense of humor, the Australian, I don't know if that's the case, that sense of freedom and independence, the sense of really the warmth, that when I first came to Australia, I didn't think I felt I didn't have that. But I mean, that's just an impression, because now I've got a really wider community of friends and family who both come from both cultures and other cultures. It's like you can love what you have and still be open to other experiences.